greetings, or good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, or some would even say salutations. I'm Dr. Thomas Rashard Easley, and I'm here to talk to you today about a topic that's fun to me, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But it's also a topic that's challenging, not just to me, but for many people. And what I want to do in this presentation is I want to talk about why it's challenging, or at least give you some ideas of why diversity is challenging. The point of this presentation is not to upset people, not to offend people, not to even trigger people. But what I will say is, or let me give you a suggestion. If anything I say in this presentation triggers you, bothers you, or even potentially offends you, even though that's not my aim, before just paying attention to how you feel, which is very important because feelings are valid, ask yourself, why did that offend me? Perhaps there's something personally that you need to deal with or you need to look at that you haven't looked at yet. Or if it really does offend you because of something I said or the way that I said it, reach out to me. And I'd love to have a conversation about it, okay? Thank you, and now we're going to get this presentation started. Now let me pull up my presentation here, and we're going to get started. All right. So what I appreciate is that the presentation kind of immediately went to the first slide, but let me take that back. The title of this presentation is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Checks and Challenges, Checks and Challenges. I like playing with that because what checks and challenges makes me think about is checks and balances. Checks and balances. In the United States, we have a three-branch government: legislative, executive, and judicial. And if any of those branches are off, then technically the whole system is off, because one of the things that they do is they're set in place, at least the ideal is that they're to help check each other and keep them in balance. And the same that I think diversity, equity, and inclusion primarily will work in a place of business or work in an organization. That in some ways, that's really what diversity will do. It helps you to check the things and help balance things out as you recognize what is unfair or what is not working for everybody. So first slide, why is diversity challenging? Well, to me, it's kind of simple why it's challenging, but I don't think that the 3 points that I have in this slide are the only reasons. These are just I think, general reasons or initial reasons that come to mind. The first one, history. Everyone in every organization has a past. It really, sometimes it does floor me how people come into an organization, and when they initially get there, I'm talking about within the first month, 6 months, or a year, they want to change everything, but they want to change it all, and they really don't understand the organization's history, how the organization got there. They may somewhat understand the impact that the organization is having. They may even understand some of the impact that it's having on them. But if they don't understand the history of the organization, they're really setting themselves up for failure or for a lot of headaches if you're trying to bring about change as it relates to diversity. The next reason that diversity is challenging is unawareness. Everyone has some things that they do not know. And another way that we can characterize unawareness is blind spots. Everyone has some things that they just do not see. And sometimes we have things that we see, but we don't want to change or we don't want to look at. And then last, that really is to segue into things being personal. We all have to face something that is challenging, or we need tools to explore it. And the thing that I've learned in life in my over 40 years now is a lot of times it's the challenges that help you to grow and go to the next level. So for those people who avoid conflict, who avoid a confrontation, which I can appreciate that, sometimes that's probably what you need to do in order to mature or get to the next level. But then there are also some people who just feel that they thrive on confrontation and conflict. And I'm not talking to you, but I will say this to you. Those people that thrive for conflict and confrontation, I really kind of want to encourage you to understand that, number one, everyone is not like that. And number two, when you bring that kind of tension into an organization or even into an interaction, it can really be negative for you as well as for other people. It puts people on edge and it puts them on the defensive instead of people being more calm and being on the offensive. So as I said, personally, we all have something to work on. Now, I want to give you some terminology, or at least a term that I don't think many people throw around a lot. But this term, if you look up a number of theorists and philosophers who work in diversity, they often use this term monoculture. And the reason monoculture is such a significant term, because mono being one, culture, being basically one culture, what we're saying is, or the question is your organization a monoculture? You may go, what does that mean? In essence, does your organization reflect the contributions of a single individual and operate under a single vision for the organization? Seeks to maintain the current structure and resist change. Now, let me give you an example of what this can look like without this being horrible or horrid. I have a business. I'm an entrepreneur. And just think about what happens when you start a business. What's one of the main purposes people start a business? To suit or meet a mission that they feel is not being met. And usually another reason for starting a business that generates income is so that you can generate income and make money, which means, simply speaking, if you want to protect what you're doing and do it for or through longevity, then that means you're going to develop structures or rules or policies to help protect you and keep you moving forward and keep your business or you out of trouble, right? Okay, that's just what you do to be a good legal citizen. That's just what you do to be a good business person. So what I want to ask you is, think about the organization that you work at, whether it's an environmental organization, whether it's an academic organization, whether it's a social or economic organization, science, medical, legal, whatever the purpose. Think about who started that firm or how that firm got started. Think about what moved or what motivated that firm to get started. This is why I tell people to pay attention to the history. Because if an organization got started because it was defending somebody or something, or it got started because it was fighting for the rights of something else, or fighting for something to be heard, right? And it's something that this individual cares about. Well, what happens if what needs to be done is no longer relevant, but you're still moving in that direction? What happens if the way that you organize this or put this whole organization together, the reason that you need it is no longer needed, like the situation has been handled, or the way that you do it is not necessarily supported in the current way or the current flow of society? What do you do? Right? And that happens to all of us. We all can outgrow things. We all can outmature things. So then that's why I want to ask the next question, which is still on this slide. Is your organization multicultural? Now, what does that mean? That means it reflects the contributions and interests of diverse cultural and social groups in its mission, operations, and product or service delivery. Now, I have to say this. When I just read that statement, that sounded so good and it sounded so ideal. Everyone being recognized, every voice being heard. That really sounds great. But remember, I said I want to talk about why diversity is challenging. So this kind of leads me to the first reason why it's challenging. One of the reasons why diversity is challenging is because when you have too many voices being heard, in my opinion, why that can lead to generating solidarity, it can also generate confusion. Because when one person is speaking, then another person is speaking, then another idea is being presented, then another idea is being presented. How do we address all of these? And here's the other question. How do we address all of these in an organization that was started as a monoculture, that already has one mission, that already has one vision? So you see, it's a clash. It's a clash of cultures. It's a clash of time. It could be a clash of generations. It could be a clash of understanding. So that's one reason why monoculture is difficult. Now, let me just make it a little bit more simple. How is a monoculture created? You or a group has an idea. I want to address climate change. I want to bring a certain community of people more resources. Then you generate what the parameters are for success. Well, in order for us to be successful, we will see that we're impacting climate change or the messaging, or we are bringing more resources to people. Now you implement these actions and ideas in a way that makes sense to you. Well, what if the messaging that you're doing offends people? You just don't know it because the people that it offends are not a part of your organization. What if the people that you're trying to help, right, don't like the way that you're trying to help them, and it's because you don't have a relationship with them, yet you're still moving? Do you see how you can unintentionally cause harm or damage or hurt people? And then what do is you design safeguards or policies that determine how you operate. And remember, they are developed to protect you. So another sense or idea that I want to give you is systems are protected by the people who made them, because the people who make them designed it in a way to protect them. Now, The other thing that's important to think about, right? So if you just think about this in terms of business, right? You can behave in an exclusive way with no maliciousness in your approach. Like if I want to work with African American people, I say I want to work with African American people in the South, but people in the Northeast or African American people in the Northeast have the same problem. But I said that I want to focus on people in the Southeast. Why? Because I am from the Southeast. You see how there's no maliciousness in that. I'm not saying people in the Northeast don't matter and that they don't need help and that it's not my place to help you, but it's my business and I determine where it is that I want to work. So I just want to, so I hope that you can see that. Someone, now with that, let's think about this, the next bullet. Someone may always be left out until they're part of your organization. That's not me saying, as I said, people don't matter. Kind of like saying black is beautiful is not saying that white is ugly. That's not what it's saying. What I'm saying is I'm embracing who I am and calling myself beautiful, irrespective, okay, of who you are. This is really about me. So the same way, someone can be left out of your organization because they're not a part of your organization, but that does not mean that I don't want them to be a part. So for those people sometimes who respond in a way when they see people moving in a direction and they say, oh, they're not being inclusive, what I want to challenge you to do is, I'm not saying it's wrong to be a contrarian or at times to even be an antagonist. I just definitely advise people to get your information together and do your research and do real research. Don't just look something up, but do a deep dives before you take or make an absolute statement or take a position that really may make you look incompetent because you don't know what you're talking about. Third bullet, you're trying to integrate fairness in a space that may not be meant for it. Now, this is a major point right here. You're trying to integrate fairness in the space that may not be meant for it. I'll give you, for me, my ultimate example, which is academia. And I'm going to say it in a way that hopefully doesn't offend people, but I'm trying to make a point by using facts. In academia, there's a thing that's called tenure. Okay, what is tenure? The way that I understand tenure is it's granted particularly to faculty that it really allows you to do the kind of research that you want to do without putting yourself or the university in harm's way. Because the university or the place that you work generates either its funds or its scholarship or its knowledge through the research. So we want to protect you because we believe that you will continue to bring this work to us. The problem with tenure now is that it protects people and allows them to keep their jobs even when they're doing things that could be bad, poor, or offensive. So right there, that's one way that you see how it's unfair. It allows people who probably should not be there to stay there. But the other point that I want to make about tenure is that if you have multiple groups at an organization, but one group has that benefit right there, that's unfair. You see, without you even trying to be unfair. So if faculty or whoever can get a job and hold it and be protected and never lose it, while there are other people, and it's probably the majority of the organization who does not have that protection, right there you have something that is unfair. And then the last thing that I want to mention is hierarchy. Different responsibilities between the people, a reward system that recognizes certain efforts and progress. See, the other thing, and this is why I caution people who love awards and rewards. I often tell people when they have rewards, which is why I don't overly get excited, but I can be appreciative. Oh man, you got that award, man, congratulations. And then I say, thank you. And then sometimes people go, why was that a cavalier or a lackluster thank you? And it's not that I don't appreciate you acknowledging the accomplishment, but what I do understand is I would not have been awarded this if people didn't value what I was doing. So if the value wasn't there, if the people weren't there who cared about it, I wouldn't be recognized. So that is why I don't overly get too excited, because maybe the reason that I'm being recognized now is just because of the people or the person that is in that position. Now, many of us say diversity is preferred. In 2020, I doubt that you will hear people say, even racist, sexist, polygamous, heterosexist, homophobic individuals, I don't think people will openly, outwardly say diversity is not something that we need. But when I'm working with people who say that diversity is what we want, I often ask this question: why diversify? And I need them to answer the question, why diversify? Because they need to understand why it's important to them. Because if they don't understand why it's important to them, then what you could potentially be doing is setting up movements or a structure that can hurt people. So I say, why diversify? Because just like in the medical industry, the diagnosis determines the treatment. In my opinion, the why determines the how. And if you are promoting diversity, you have to understand that you are definitely going to face challenges that may be historical and may have been ignored in an organization since its inception. For example, if you work at an organization that was started by men, ran by men, and probably has mostly men working in the organization, I'm not saying that, man, we shouldn't be surprised or upset that we don't see more gender equity in a place of work. But I'm not a person who really kind of overreacts with people who can't manage themselves when they see something that's been going on for 100 years, but because it just hit you this year, now it's time for me to overreact. Okay. So this is why I tell people, learn the history of an organization. One, so that you can also manage yourself when you're trying to deal with these challenges. Establishing fairness in a place where hierarchy and inequities are normal is going to be hard. It's going to be hard because you're basically challenging the structure and changing it. Okay. And remember, if the parameters of what success were already determined, that means that you're changing a whole system of things. And the other thing to keep in mind is you can't do this work if you're promoting diversity and not experience any discomfort if you're changing the system, because either you will upset those that don't want change, or you'll be in conflict when this change potentially impacts your privilege. I'm going to stick with the same example that I just gave. You're a tenured professor, you're in a position of power, you work at an institution, okay, where you get to decide how this train moves. Do you really want to give up that power, especially if how you determine whether the train moves impacts your personal economy? It impacts your comfort and convenience in the organization. Do you really want to change that? And I don't think you're wrong to say no if the answer is no. I just think that you are definitely playing a dangerous game if you act like this is not going to impact you. And I can honestly say this before I go to the next slide. I remember I did a presentation. This is about 4 years ago. And a good friend of mine, she was working on her doctorate. She's now a doctor and finished. And she was working with this particular program that I was there to advise people on. And she's always been supportive of me. She's always been friends with me and supportive of all the work that we've done. And this one particular time we were doing a presentation and I was inviting people to consider what would it look like if diversity was actualized and things were different. And the one time my friend, I'll admit she is also a white woman, she identifies as white. That was the one time I saw her sit in a group, in a space, and she looked uncomfortable. But I didn't want to ask her why she was uncomfortable because I didn't want to assume that she was. So after my workshop was done and we were going to dinner, or we went to dinner, and she came and she sat next to me at dinner. And I was like, hey, how you doing? And she says, Thomas, I really want to share something with you, and I hope I don't upset you when I share this. But you said this, that if people have something challenging to say, that they can say it to you. And I said, well, come on, bring it on. Like, let's see. What is it? And she says, I support and I believe that diversity can and will work and that we need it. And she said, I will admit that as a white woman, I am scared of what it's going to look like when it is successful, because I do feel and understand that it's going to change some things as it relates to access and privilege for me. And I told her, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm not going to make you feel guilty for sharing that. Everyone who is in a position of power or privilege, when they see change coming, in my opinion, if you do not have a fear about how it's going to look, you're either lying to yourself or you're lying to the people around you. Okay? Because who wants things to change for them if they're in a plush or in a comfortable seat situation? So now I want to talk about the differences between being concerned about diversity versus being committed to diversity. Because many of us work in organizations and sometimes we go, why is it that individuals do not get this diversity thing and why don't they understand? And I like to tell people, well, it's probably because you got one or two things happening. You have a group of people who are either concerned about diversity, as you see on the left side of the screen, or you have a group of people who are committed to diversity, but they're not actually the same people, but they're probably working in the same thing and don't realize how they could be stifling the progress and how you're moving. So let's look at people who are concerned about diversity. If you're concerned about diversity, one trait that you possess, or one thing that you're probably doing, is you're always questioning. You always question everything that's going on. What is this and why are we doing this and how is this going to work? Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think it's wrong to want to see the future before it happens. I don't think it's wrong to project what may happen. I just think that it's going to be challenging if you say you value something and you've never done it before, you do see other people or other organizations thriving with it if you actually pay attention and do research. You're attracting diverse groups of people there to you, but then you're the person, because you've been there so long, you're the one always questioning things. The other thing is sabotaging progress with your input. And this could be people who've been there a long time, let alone people who are new to an organization. You're going to sabotage where we're going by sharing how you feel and what you think, that in a way can antagonize what we're doing or really challenge it or cause it to stop. Okay, so here again, that's you potentially being part of the problem and not a part of progress. You're always negative about the steps that are being taken. Everything that I'm sharing with you, I have to be honest with you, I can share it because I've been that. I have been everything that I'm talking about. I've been that person that's always been negative about things that are being taken. You say, hey, we're going to order vegetarian. Well, why we got to do vegetarian this time? Then that same person can go, well, we're going to have vegetarian and meat. Oh, so now we're going to do both. How come we can't just have meat? You see, so you have people who do that. Then you have those individuals who take things personally by making the negativity about yourself or making it about you. There's so many times in every organization that I've worked in where I see people who, and this is the word that they use, I don't feel respected, or I feel disrespected. And these people who feel disrespected or don't feel respected probably have all the power in the organization. They're the people who can't lose their job. They're the ones who get to make these decisions, but yet they still make, in my opinion, they take this immature posture, okay, or this insecure posture of, I feel disrespected, yet you're not a part of what we're doing, okay? How do you feel disrespected when it's not about you and when you're not a part of it? You see, so that says something about you, not about what we're doing. And then lastly, you consider others' behaviors and ideas before your own. That's technically the root of hypocrisy. It's like, I'm going to point the finger at you, but I have 3 fingers pointing back at me, and I'm not paying attention to each finger that's pointing back at me, and the thumb if it's stretching back far enough. I'm not paying attention to the 4 digits pointing back at me, and I'm putting all the weight on that one pointing at you. And usually what happens is people are doing that because it makes themselves feel good. That's why I attribute it to insecurity, okay? And I also attribute it to immaturity as well. Now, those who are committed to diversity, these are some of the behaviors that you will probably demonstrate. You're always looking for the potential or possibility to succeed, meaning that you always leave space open, like, we can do this, okay? But you're always trying to find the solution. You actively work on yourself while being engaged in promoting diversity. And that's one of the crucial points that I want to go back to being concerned about diversity. For the individuals who are doing this work without working on yourself, you are very problematic because you are moving in your incompetence, which means you're blind. You're moving when you technically don't know what you're doing, and you're doing it when you have all of the opportunity and other resources that you can access to educate yourself. See, so that's why you're part of the problem. You won't humble yourself enough to go learn something. You just want to motivate and boost yourself up by doing something. But when you're actively working on yourself while being engaged, that helps you to develop perspective, even in the midst of times that are uncomfortable. 3, you're curious about the steps being taken to enact diversity. I'm not challenging the steps, but I'm more so curious about the steps. Like, okay, can you explain it to me so that I can see either A, how it works, so that I can also see how I am positioned in it or how I can help it. You consider multiple lenses when issues arise to try to see the other perspective. And this in particular, I want to say for those people who believe and support diversity, who want to antagonize or who want to challenge culture, like myself, make sure that you're looking at multiple lenses when things happen. Because you, as you may be moving, you think in the lens of equity, you may be moving in the lens of inequity, trying to be so positive and so open while disregarding other people. And this is also why history is very important. While I understand that there's language that is changing, there can even be racism or sexism in language. Understand that because you didn't always know what you knew, other people didn't either. So try not to be so dogmatic in your approach when you're approaching people, because your ignorance can also blind where your intelligence can really shine. And then you consider your contribution to conflict before you challenge someone else. If there's an issue between me or another colleague, and my initial response is, man, what did I do? Or how did I contribute to that? That's a person that's committed to diversity, because you're making it about yourself. And in the end, that's the most important and honest thing you can do if you're working in this work, is it has to be about you. And I don't mean it has to be about you as in I want to satisfy myself. I mean, you have to always remember that you are not perfect. You do not have it all together. So there's no reason for you to always come at other people based on your standards when your standards are flawed, and based on your movement of your stage when your stage, you didn't get there by yourself. So I want to encourage us to see diversity as a solution, not just as or as the output. See it as the solution. To me, I see diversity as the process to get us to where it is that we're trying to go. So solutions take time. So don't look for the quick fix. There's so many people who always say, hey, okay, now that I've gone through this workshop, now that I've learned this, I want to move fast. No, sit your tail down and let it marinate. Solutions are not always comfortable for the people involved, because you may not get what you desire in its entirety. That's another idea that I have as it relates to diversity. Sometimes people think getting 100% of everything that you want is good. But I can tell you this just from being an adult versus being a child. Even when I was a child and I got everything that I wanted, it didn't always work out for me. When I got some of what I wanted and I understood why things were held back and why things came, it worked out much better in my favor, because I was able to move eloquently as well as intelligently. You need time to create multiple ideas. Okay, time, that's all relative with who you are and where you are and who you're working with, but you need time to create multiple ideas. 4, energy. You need the energy to generate more support and to cultivate more participants and contributors. You cannot do this alone. 5, are you committed? Because you must be committed and be willing to see this to the end. If you just want to get something started and then walk away, to me, you are what I might call a disruptor, which means that some people like disruption and some people think that disruption is actual activism. I actually disagree with that. I think that disruption can be good, but if you're not willing to see it all the way through, acknowledge yourself as a disruptor, not as a person who is like an activist, or as a person who is like the center of a movement. And then last but not least, if you're doing this work, you must take a break to catch your breath and check your progress. You must take a break, because if you're totally and always fully going, you're going to burn out and you're going to wear yourself out. You might even get angry and get mad at what it is that you're doing. Okay. So I want to leave you with that. And then I want to close out with this. If anything that I said in this presentation, as I mentioned earlier, offended you or made you mad, I invite you to reach out to me. Contact me. Here's an email that you can touch base with me. There's my name. Here go my other handles, so you can find me, whether it's on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, my email, and if you just want to Google me. All right. So I want to thank you for listening to this presentation and watching this presentation. And I want to ask you to do something. Before you get busy and involved in diversity, before you get heavily into the throes of it, and you really want to see progress and you want to move, remember, look within, and you must always be working and challenging yourself. If you're not challenging yourself as you grow, you are going to be a big part of the issue and not part of the solution. Learn the history of the place. Remember, mind your blind spots and pay attention to your own personal history as you continue to grow. Because the one thing, or the one person that Thomas Rashard Easley can change is Thomas Rashard Easley. I advise you to look and do the same, please. Thank you for your time. Until the next one, take care.